Good morning. Welcome. Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. We try to entertain and inform here. And got an interesting show today. It's Friday, so we're gonna have a little fun today. Um, and by fun, I mean we're gonna talk about some interesting topics, and then talk about some real things facing our country. Now, and then we're going to break it down on a personal level and do some case studies. So when I say case studies, we're going to look at specific cases and how it goes when you actually call in and talk to one of our attorneys. And the big question is why? Why should you even call and talk to somebody? What are some of the pitfalls? Um, but how this can help you. So it kind of made me think back to the days of law school. And we'll talk about, that's kind of humorous, but stay tuned. We've got a lot to cover. Welcome back, everybody. We have a lot of news, and we're gonna first article we're gonna cover today. It's pretty straightforward, and then we're gonna have some fun. So, and because it's Friday, I'm gonna cover both sides of some arguments today, and kind of throw out some meat, some food for thought, and then really dive into the topic of the day, and that's why should you talk to a tax attorney? How complicated can what seems to be a simple case be? So the this first article, this is from irs.gov. It's pretty straightforward. This is tax relief for people in Ohio, certain counties in Ohio impacted by tornadoes. So if you are caught in this disaster relief area, and these are the counties involved. So Auglaize, Crawford, Darke, Delaware, Hancock, Licking, Logan, Mercer, Miami, Richland, and Union counties. So again, there is help. FEMA is providing this. Uh, um, FEMA designated these areas as emergency areas, and here are individual income tax returns not due on April 15th, but kicked out till September 3rd. So again, various things to adjustments the IRS is making to help people in this disaster area. This is what is typically done in disaster areas. So we're gonna talk about, this is gonna be the theme for today is how much government involvement do we want in the case. So Seattle, is very well known for making a lot of rules. And here they have a law mandating higher pay for food delivery workers. Sounds great, right? Why don't we want them to have more, higher pay? California did this recently, mandating higher pay just for fast food workers. But what happens to the actual workers when they put this in place? And when you have the government mandating price increases, price controls, um, what normally happens. So here in Seattle, they talk about an individual here, Gary. He's made a living delivering food in Seattle. But now that they passed this new law increasing his wage, his livelihood is now at risk. So, a little bit of counterintuitive. We increase their wages and mandate higher wages, but why would this put him out of a job and have cause them to have to look for something else? And he says, I can't pay rent. Orders are down 30 to 40%. So this is whenever you try to mandate something, what happens is that they get less. So breaking this down, what was mandated is that he has to earn 74 cents per mile traveled at a minimum of $5 an order. So, but what happened, this comes out to about $26 an hour, not counting tips. And as a result, DoorDash and Uber Eats, some of the biggest, they increase their fees. Say, okay, you're going to mandate that we have to pay everybody a minimum of $5 an order. Okay, we're going to add a $5 fee to all these orders. And what happened? 300,000 fewer orders. 7 million in lost revenue. Not only for DoorDash and Uber Eats, but all the companies that are using these to deliver food. And in the end, lost income for drivers. And so now DoorDash and Uber Eats are trying to convince the Seattle City Council to reverse this. So here we have, Fortune magazine also profiled Tony Isles, so a 30-year-old food delivery driver who's killing it. 10,000 deliveries over the last 4 years by his count. And then now he's waiting 5 or 6 hours just for one Uber Eats request. Demand is dead, and many restaurants have reported massive declines in delivery sales. So a nearly 50% drop in third-party delivery apps. So you have some people on the Seattle Council demanding more evidence that this law is hurting people and backfiring. Others have already said, okay, we need to fix this. So mainly the president, Sarah Nelson, they're already trying to draft a fix to it. But why do we have to hurt people before basic economics are considered? So, we see this happen time and time again, where in California, they, famously just jacked up prices. What's the result? Few people aren't buying fast food anymore. Even McDonald's has had to limit how much they can increase prices, and the result is business just shut down. It's like the pizza delivery, and growing up, pizza was delivered. That's just how it happened. People would have pizza delivered, but now they've had to fire all their pizza delivery people because of the increase in minimum wage. And so all these people that are making it, maybe it's college kids. So we're going to watch a funny video here talking about this. I've shared one of these before. And it's a kind of a one-sided approach, but I think it kind of highlights what happens when you have people driven out of the market, losing jobs because of government regulations.
I have a project that I don't have time to complete, but it should only take a few more hours of work. Would you mind if I paid you $50 to take care of it?
Sure, I got nothing better to do.
What? $50? You can't live off that! How can you pay this person anything less than a full-time livable salary when they're working for you?
Well, because not every service we might exchange money for requires a full-time salaried employee. For example, I have a client who's paying me $2,000 to create a short animation. I've spent the last month putting it together, but now I'm finding I won't have the time to complete the last 5 hours of work. There's two possible scenarios. I can find someone who's willing to work for me, let them earn a bit of money assisting me, and deliver a product to a happy client. Or you can shut me down for not paying a, quote, living wage, unquote, in which case my project won't be completed. I'll miss out on my hard-earned money, my reputation will be damaged, the person willing to help me will miss out on $50, and the client won't get their product. Seems pretty unfair that you'd be able to make everyone's life so much more difficult.
But that's just greedy. You only feel that way because you're getting a living wage.
I'm okay with it. Plus, I need some rent money.
Quiet, you!
Actually, virtually none of my clients pay me enough to live off of. Most of them can only afford to hire me for a few months out of the year for a fraction of the average salary. But fortunately, I've been able to accumulate enough clients so that my combined earnings are enough to support myself. But if you told each of my clients that because they weren't paying me a full-time salary, they shouldn't be able to hire me, I would never have been able to build my career or pay any of the private contractors I work with. That would be unfair to everyone.
Huh. Well, I guess that makes sense for part-time work, but a lot of businesses pay low wages to workers who are with them full-time.
Well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, most minimum wage workers are young people working part-time. Only 1% of full-time hourly wage earners make minimum wage or less, compared to 6% of part-time hourly wage earners. And of all hourly workers earning minimum wage or less, half are under the age of 25, despite the fact that people 25 and under only make up about 20% of hourly wage earners. These are often high school and college students working jobs in the summer and during the school year, people with other sources of income just looking for extra cash, and a lot of people who've not yet developed the skills or experience needed to command a higher salary. But most people don't remain in low-paid positions their entire lives. As they get older and gain more education and more experience, they move up in income as well.
Look, whether it's myself, Seamus, or someone working at a fast food joint, it's good that you want people to earn a fair wage. But what's most important is for us to be able to have a job in the first place. The way to ensure that is to lower as many of the barriers to getting a job or becoming an entrepreneur as we possibly can, not to put more in the way.
Exactly. Are we really going to cut the people who are just starting out or people like me with multiple employers out of the workforce?
Yes! Police!
Can't always count on people to be reasonable.
Hey, at least you've got walls.
Hey folks.
So, kind of a humorous cartoon, but going to when you have government mandates like that, if you don't comply, you can get hit really hard by penalties, by fees, and it can really kill businesses. And moving on to the next one. This one is, and we're running up against a deadline here, but the next article here is talking about student loans. So again, another big topic, kind of a legal hot potato. This one is talking about who are the biggest beneficiaries of new student debt cancellation? Households making more than 300, an average of 312,000 a year. Now, granted, that's households, so a lot of times that's their parents, but it's people that have plenty of money, and and the average student loan debt for these are $25,500. Who has the most student loan debt? People pursuing higher education. And so the whole point of this is that the public treasury is used to pay off student loans of families who represent the top 5% of earners. So the government is not, we're not having a free exchange here. We're taking those funds from people that, we're taking the debt from people that have the most money and that benefit the most, people with masters and doctorates and who have pretty high earning potential in the future, and forcing everybody else to pay for it. Now, this is just adding debt, and the big problem is when the more the government gets in there to fix the problem, the more tuition rates just climb up and up. So we're gonna watch another short video when we come back, and talk about student loans and again government intervention, and then we're gonna jump to the flip side. So we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're gonna do another funny little clip here, and then we're gonna go to the flip side of things. So I think these shows are informative, they're funny, but this one is talking about student loan forgiveness, and so does it always make sense, or does it make sense at all? And the people having their loans forgiven, of course, think it makes perfect sense. So let's go ahead and watch this.
They've got to find some way to get people to watch CNN.
Oh, come on. Even at the airport, who's desperate enough to...
Guys, my favorite reporter's on.
With his student debt relief plan, the president is personally forgiving your student loans. Up to $10,000.
I can't believe this.
Oh, boy.
Brilliant.
Hey, it's what Bubble Man would have wanted.
That's why I'm upset.
Ron, almost all of this debt exists because the government was pushing loans to begin with. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, subsidized loans mean more expensive college tuition. And this is just another subsidy that's going to cause the cost of tuition to inflate.
It will literally only make things worse.
You should be happy for me, and for everyone else who's taken out a student loan they'll never repay.
Ron, I paid my loans off the hard way. Why do I gotta pay yours off the hard way too?
That's like someone surviving cancer and then being upset that a cure is found for people who are just diagnosed. You ghoul.
Dude, you chose to take out loans. You don't choose to get cancer.
Yeah, it's more like someone who's never had cancer being given cancer by someone who does have it. You're giving me cancer just talking about this.
What about people who have already paid off more money than they borrowed because of the insane interest rates?
That's one group I can sympathize with. These are federally guaranteed loans, so the idea of making insane amounts of interest off of them seems very wrong to me. But that's a separate discussion from the government offering blanket loan forgiveness to everyone, even people who have barely paid in at all.
But this is gonna help so many people who are struggling. Just think of all those poor PhDs flipping burgers.
I wish I had an active enough imagination. PhDs have a 1.1% unemployment rate. And considering their average salary is over $90,000 a year, I think it's safe to say that the 98.9% who are employed aren't flipping burgers. In fact, roughly 50% of college debt is owed by people with a master's degree or higher, meaning that on average they make twice as much as people with no college education, and their unemployment rate is 3 times lower.
And you think they shouldn't have to pay for that privilege? For the fact that they got to spend 6 years out of the workforce just to step out into the world with a massive economic advantage despite never having contributed any good or service before? Even worse, you think people without a degree who make half the amount are the ones who should cover the cost. You don't need a break on your loans, we need a break from you!
Attention flyers. The Bubbleman Memorial Airline Flight 675 back to Florida has been delayed.
Yeah, looks like we're gonna be here a while. I could use a drink. Which one of you's buying?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, which one of you is buying? That's a funny ending line. So this whole idea that something for nothing, and here's the crazy thing about this. And in the article it mentioned that on average, for every dollar in increased federal aid that goes to tuition, student loans, etc., tuition costs go up 60 cents. And a lot of the schools, they don't need the money. It's not about, they don't need the money at all. Harvard and a lot of these top universities, they have so much in endowments and money that they've saved and invested for so many years. They could eliminate tuition for all their students and just make it competitive to see who gets in. They don't need the money. But they still charge tuition, and they're still jacking up tuition every single year. Why? Because the federal government is making sure they get paid. There is zero risk to them to giving students these huge loans. They're backed by the federal government, and if the federal government forgives these loans, they still get paid. So if the students don't pay the loans, the federal government pays it, and then the students now owe the federal government, not the university. So it's a win-win for the university. So why not jack up tuition as high as possible and make a killing? So because there's the consequences of making poor decisions have been taken out of the equation. Thank you, government. And this is right and left have pushed these ideas. Everybody needs to go to college. Well, now we have a shortage of blue collar workers. Now we have a shortage of skilled workers, people willing to work with their hands. And honestly, sometimes those are the jobs where you can go make a killing. Welding, plumbers, electricians, because we don't have enough people. We don't have enough skilled workers. And so we've distorted our economy once again. And, now people with master's degrees, doctorates, are asking for and begging, clamoring for student loan forgiveness. And really, they've come out with different numbers every other month. And most of it is going to be proven to be unconstitutional. It was struck down pretty handily by the Supreme Court once already. And everything Biden has been doing, the Biden presidency, is the same thing. So it's just cheap political vote buying. But what are the universities doing every time they have this guarantee? It's more demand, people going to college. Oh, I won't have to pay this eventually. And they're jacking up tuition, which hurts people, hardworking people that actually pay as you go, people that actually earn the money for college, work through college, and pay off their debt. I went in the military. I had the college fund, military college fund, to pay for my college, and I worked. So I still have plenty of law school debt, but going through undergrad, I paid almost all of it compared to the people that took out huge loans, went to expensive schools, and again, then they don't have to worry about, we're talking about just covering those costs. Even they chose to go to expensive schools rather than more affordable schools. And I went to a state school. I was going to be a teacher. Didn't think I needed a fancy degree, and I did just fine. Now, the next article, I'm going to switch gears, and this is an example of where we want government involvement. And it's actually this is about the Biden administration raising tariffs sharply on China. So EV, steel, solar cells. Now here, this makes sense. Again, I'm arguing, before, you want the government less involved, fewer barriers to economic freedom. But here, this is something that I don't know why he's doing it in the last year of his administration, but kudos to him for finally doing it. And I think people across the board are saying, look, China is not our friend. Anybody that thinks China is our friend is watching all the wrong news sources. They are trying to destroy our EV market, which is a huge, this is one of the biggest goals that have been pushed, not just by the Biden administration, but by other administrations, to make sure our auto industry can transition to EVs, which is supposedly the future. That's yet to be seen. But again, China has been not only producing, they've cornered the market on a lot of the materials needed, rare materials for batteries, for solar, for wind, and then they are now flooding the market by overproducing Chinese EVs. So they have cheap goods flooding not only the US, but the world. So by raising tariffs, it protects our own domestic market in the United States. But guess where they're going? China's saying, fine, you're going to jack up tariffs up to 100% on some goods. So 100% tariff on EVs and increase it elsewhere. So Chinese increased tariffs on Chinese steel, aluminum products, lithium-ion batteries, and solar cells. Just I think it was within the last week I talked about a steel plant closing in West Virginia. A lot of damage has already been done to our industries. People have already suffered. When you close plants like that, it costs millions to bring them back online, and it has to be worth it. The problem is we've sat by and not done much about China for years. Trump levied some tariffs, and now, again, while that was ridiculed by the left before, now they're increasing that and this would apply to about 18 billion worth of annual imports from China. And here China is simply too big to play by its own rules, basically saying China's too big to cheat and get away with it and have us not do anything about it, because they're causing real damage to our economy, real damage to American workers. And while we want to pay our workers more, we want to have plenty of protections, we want to have environmental protections too. We don't want to be polluting our world and where we live and grow up. But it's hard to do that when China's polluting like crazy, using slave labor, using forced labor, and flooding markets with cheap products that are, undercutting us. So they've overproduced mainly because of massive subsidies from the Chinese communist government. And they're doing this is part of a strategy. There's nothing innocent about this. So by overproducing them, they're flooding markets, not just in the US, but here's a heavy subsidies have driven Chinese EV industry into overcapacity with cheap prices. So 21 billion in EV subsidies between 2009 and 2022. And even though they ended the subsidies for anything without an EV in their name, they're still heavily subsidizing all the industries connected to this. So this is how China plays. They support their industries, they subsidize it like crazy, and then use that to attack foreign markets. So they expect Chinese EV production capacity to reach 36 million by 2025, which is next year. The problem is right now, so they're only producing 50 million for the Chinese market. That means they're going to be exporting 20 million next year. We have already seen a downturn in EV production, electric vehicle production in the United States. People just aren't buying them. And so they're struggling as it is. They're losing money on EVs. And this foreign competition that is designed to undercut them is really hurting them. Now, it's not just the United States. Mexico, they're sending to Europe, and they're selling these not only U.S. market but throughout the world. So you have German, Korean, South Korean, and Swedish brands all owned by the Chinese, where they're flooding markets and undercutting all those. So and you don't have the Chinese EV brands being sold in the U.S. market. However, you have plenty of other companies owned by the Chinese doing the exact same thing. So again, it gets into the charts. When you have other governments acting as bad actors, you do need our government to step up and protect our domestic production. It can be counterproductive in the long term. What we really need is someone to negotiate and force the Chinese to behave with real consequences, though. And huge increases in tariffs, while that will protect our market, it's going to hurt, and they're still going to hurt other markets. And again, the United States is only one market in the global economy here. So again, its impact is limited. What we really need is someone to stand the Chinese down and unite, markets against China and unfair competition. So again, I'm going to hold off on. I'm just going to mention a couple others. I'm not even going to do this. We're running out of time. I'm going to share one last article here. The Seattle City Council has a massive transportation tax hike that they're proposing. Why? Because their roads are really bad. So they're talking about a $1.45 billion for a transportation levy. However, this increases property taxes, makes it harder for people to live in the area, more expensive. And so they have to include enough goodies and get enough special interests involved to support this tax. And 58% of the main roads were in fair, poor, or very poor condition. About 50% of non-major streets match that. So a lot of work need to be done in Seattle. Here in Tucson, they're doing a lot of work because same thing, you have a lot of issues. The problem is the current funds either aren't being used wisely or consistently, and so you get a patchwork of repairs. So if you don't have a good plan in place, if you don't do this consistently, that you're repairing roads. Here in Tucson, we have one of the major streets on the far east side. It's been repaired, broadened, improved in stages, but that means it goes for 3 lanes each way, from the freeway, even south. They just improved an area south of the freeway, and it goes for about 5 miles north, and then it goes down to a 1-lane crossing over a bridge. And that's where everything bottlenecks, both ways. Every single day it creates massive backups. And then you get past the bridge, and then it's open again until you go farther enough now up the road that it turns, another couple miles up the road, it turns back into 1 lane. So it's kind of silly. Used to be worse, but they've been broadening it and improving it. When I first moved here, there was an area where the potholes were so bad. A motorcycle hit one of the potholes, lost control, and the guy, we came up on this. The guy had broken his arm, his wrist and arm, just by hitting a pothole on a motorcycle. And so this is an example where you need government to go in and make fixes, but there's no right answer here. So you have a lot of damage. You have, again, some of the other issues facing the sharp rise in car thefts due to other policies, where you have a lot of accidents, a lot of damage being caused, high speed chases and stuff. Doesn't make the street safer when you have all kinds of auto theft. So a lot of considerations going in. It's not a zero-sum thinking. We'd never want the government to do anything, but it should be thought through and take into larger considerations into place. And I've talked too much. I want to focus on our core topic today and do some case studies. Really talk about why does it make sense to talk to a tax attorney. So it's just like these different stories and articles about the government coming in with a heavy hand saying you have to do this and not considering all the factors. When you're dealing with the IRS and taxes, there are plenty of cases that might seem simple, but once you dig into it, there's usually an easier way to deal with it. You might have different considerations, and that's what I really want to focus on when we come back. And we're actually going to talk through some cases and real cases and some of the issue spotting that went on. So I'm coming up on another break. So we're going to take a deep dive into this when we come back and talk about why does it make sense to call and talk to a tax professional, talk to an attorney, and cover all your rights and options. So we'll be back after this break. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy, and have some interesting cases to go over. So I got a call yesterday from a lady, and just going to go over what we covered in her case. So initially, her case, her ex-husband had her sign some tax documents. She wasn't paying attention. So again, don't just, whatever your husband is doing or your spouse is doing, at least get informed. At least have someone explain it to you, what's going on, and make sure that both of you are signing whatever's happening. turns out he was committing fraud and tax evasion and was prosecuted for it. Um, so the IRS denied her case because it is difficult to qualify for innocent spouse. She went through that, ended up with $65,000 of debt, no child support, and here she is supporting herself and her daughter and trying to see how she can deal with this as a divorced mother. And so, and part of her case is that she's here temporarily. She's not a citizen, but she is a resident, so she's required to pay taxes. So she thought she had to sign on to these tax documents. Now, again, this adds another layer of complexity to it that she's not a resident. She has this tax debt, but she doesn't understand everything that's growing up in the United States. She understands less than your average citizen, which, again, it's not her fault, but her ex-spouse took advantage of her. And so her question to me was, what do I do? How do I deal with this $65,000 debt and I'm barely making ends meet? So I went through her financial information. Again, no assets to speak of here. And I mean, really nothing. She has a vehicle, and that's about it. And she's leasing the vehicle, so she doesn't even own that. Living off about $4,000 a month in Massachusetts. $4,000 in Massachusetts isn't very much. So we could easily show that she is underwater by about $1,000. So, someone truly suffering, someone truly having a hardship here. So I went through her options with her and I said, look, you can do either non-collectible status and freeze your balance for 2 years. It's a 2-year break from IRS collections. They're not going to bother you. And with time, as these debts are older from 17 and 18, they'll start to go away. And once they expire, you're home free. That's option 1. Option 2, you qualify to do an offer and compromise. You can settle the whole thing for around $225, but again, it's a long, involved process. The first letter almost everybody gets is a rejection letter, and the IRS has made it harder than ever to get an offer, mainly because you have to stay on top of it. So that's one of the hardest parts about doing an offer and compromise today. You can absolutely try to do one on your own. But if you miss a deadline, if you're not on top of responding, and again, you sit around, you wait for 5 to 6 months, and then boom, it's go time. You have to respond. And if you don't, if you miss a deadline, your offer gets rejected. There's so many different opportunities today for an offer to get rejected, whereas that didn't used to be the case 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. We used to submit offers all the time, and if it was a good offer, our first response would be, hey, offer accepted. Sometimes we never even had to talk to anybody. But now on almost every case, they're demanding more information. They're demanding explanations. They're trying to manipulate the numbers the worst way possible for clients, so we have to get in a fight almost every single case. Now, we're still getting them accepted, but it's a fight. So I laid out her options. I said this would be our fees to do the hardship status and the offer status. And she goes, well, I talked to someone a week ago at the IRS, and I just got this letter in the mail that says I was put in this, and we were having the conversation in Spanish, so she understood even less, because there was a language barrier as well as being an immigrant. And she said, I got this letter. It says incolectable, which means uncollectible. And I said, you really did get that letter? It's like, send me a copy of that letter. And she was actually put into a hardship status. She talked to someone, and they put her in a hardship status. So I told her, look, you don't have a lot of money. You can pay us this money now to do an offer and compromise, but you're already in this non-collectible status. So I said, what I'm going to suggest is let's follow up in 2 years. See if you still need assistance, or we can do an offer and compromise anytime you're ready, you have the funds put together. But right now, she just didn't have the funds. So it would have been really hard for her to scrape together the funds to do an offer and compromise. So we're going to follow up with her in 2 years' time. So this is why if you feel like you're getting put through the ringer, you feel like when you talk to someone, you feel like they're just trying to make a sale on the spot, get a second opinion. It's probably not the best company for you. I want to talk about another case where this guy called in, had business issues, had personal issues, had SBA issues. And he had about 3 or 4 different issues. And this is where sometimes what I'm doing kind of makes me feel like I'm taking a law school exam. So if you've never been to law school, like most people, I mean, most tests, they come in, here's the question, here's the material, we cover the material, and you're getting tested on it. It's usually pretty straightforward. If you're going into a biology test, you're taking a test on biology. And they'll ask questions where they're not hiding the ball on you. Law school is very different. They like to torture their students. You'll have a long case study. So they'll tell you, so-and-so, they came and they did this. It's kind of the history of the case. And what they're trying to train law students to do, and this is what you have to do in real practice, is to pick out all the issues. Say, okay, there's 5 or 6 issues that need to be talked about. And ironically for law students, I was a B average student in law school just because law school's crazy. I had straight A's through undergrad. Law school, I was a B average student just because it's nuts. I would do what I thought was a great job, and I would miss half the questions. Half the issues I would typically miss, a quarter, third, depending on the exam. And I would still get a B because they didn't expect us to find everything. So when I have people come and talk to me today, with the experience I have when they're talking to me, I'm like, oh, that's an issue. That's an issue. That's an issue. So in this particular case, there was an SBA loan, and the business was still open. You had business taxes, and he had to decide could he maintain his business open or not. You had personal taxes. And so and then also you have to worry about state taxes. So there's about 4 different kinds of cases all wrapped up in one case. So someone comes to me and they have, state issues. I had a big case the other day. I was talking to him. I said, hey, you owe all this money to the IRS. You never paid taxes. He was 1099 for many years. I'm like, well, what about state taxes? He's like, oh, I live in Texas. Don't have to worry about it. But most states, you do have to worry about it. And a lot of companies don't touch state taxes. So with this, whenever you have someone that has a chunk of money, a lot of people will cash out retirement accounts. And I was just speaking with this case the other day. They had a retirement account. They cashed out their 401k. And what did they do with it? Paid off credit card debt. Paid off some vehicle debt. The vehicle debt I'm not worried about, but the credit card debt is another issue. So it disqualified them from doing an offer and compromise. So when you're talking to an attorney, just dump it all on them. Share. They'll tell you if you're oversharing. But usually you want to listen, you want to get someone talking so that you can go through, okay, here's the issue I need to address, A, B, C, D, and E, and it can absolutely control which way to go. So it gets fairly complicated, but these are all the issues that you need to, if you don't address these correctly, you don't have a good idea of what you're going to qualify for. And I've seen other companies post the same thing. If you talk to someone and they say, oh, we'll do an offer and compromise for you, or we'll do a hardship status for you, or even an installment agreement. There's times I don't go through all the numbers if someone has plenty of money and they just, someone's making $15,000 to $20,000, doesn't have kids. if they don't have a lot of expenses, I'm gonna say, okay, yeah, this is an installment agreement, no questions here. But if they don't go through your financial information, they don't know what that you qualify for. Anybody that tells you, hey, pay us, let's go ahead and start, we'll do an offer and compromise or non-collectible status for you. They don't have a clue what you can qualify for. So I try not to overwhelm prospective clients or people when I first talk to them, but it's important to at least mention these topics, mention these issues. So this gentleman that called in that was from Texas, and we're talking, I think it was just over $1 million in IRS taxes. Big case, a lot of issues here, and one of his biggest issues was hadn't been to paying taxes. So we have to overcome filing compliance, payment compliance first of all. So when I'm listening to a case, we're like, okay, issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we list them all out. And so, okay, this is how we have to address these issues. Now, some of these issues, if they recently went and spent $20,000, $30,000 on credit card debts, that's going to be a problem for an offer and compromise. Either you have to add it to the offer or wait till it gets old enough that it's not going to matter anymore. I had one case recently where I was talking to someone who had a New York debt, and they've just filed their return. If you have brand new debt, New York isn't going to settle it. So you really only have two options: installment agreement or an offer and compromise with New York. And because it was brand new debt and hadn't been assessed before, it's very possible New York will not settle that. They want it to at least be 4 to 5 years old before they'll consider an offer and compromise. So that's why being informed and talking to an expert is how you make sure you're doing things the right way. And it is so important to look at all your options. So I have a client and a friend who's been with us for years. When they first came to us, their business, they didn't have their bookkeeping together, they didn't have their taxes being done right. We got that squared away for them, but then the business tanked due to COVID, due to all these issues. It just was too much and the business fell apart. So then they filed for bankruptcy. And then coming out of bankruptcy, now everybody was saying, hey, let's do these ERC claims. And they actually hired a company to do an ERC claim. And thank goodness he came and talked to me about it, because they ran into an issue because the payroll taxes weren't paid. And then the IRS is like, okay, we'll give you this ERC claim, but you have to pay the taxes first. And he's like, we don't have any money. We just went through bankruptcy. Our company's dead. And so they had to pay $30,000 to try to get, I think it was around $90,000. They didn't have the $30,000. And then the company was taking another $30,000 bite into it. It was around $27,000, which was their fee. And they wanted their fee up front. But the IRS wasn't going to give them the money till they were on a payment plan and paying this. So I'm like, there's some benefit here, but it's going to be really nasty. And if anything goes wrong, you're going to be on the hook. And so it really didn't make a lot. They might have saved $10,000 to $15,000, but they did not have the money to get on an installment agreement and stay on it and pay all this money back. They just didn't have the money. So it was a lose-lose situation. When you have questions, the more complex and thorny the case is, get tax help. And if you call us and you have a very simple case, I've had people that say, look, I could file an offer, I could set up an installment agreement, I feel comfortable enough, I just want to talk to somebody. We talk to people day in and day out, and if they can do it themselves, I say, okay, yeah, you can do it yourselves. If someone asks me that, I always give them a frank and honest answer. And if they don't have a lot of issues or problems out there, if there are issues, I'll bring them up and I'll say, hey, A, B, and C needs to be addressed. Do you have the time, the wherewithal, and the expertise to handle this? And if they don't, then we'll help them out. If they feel like they can do it on their own, okay, go try it. And I tell people, go try it. I'll follow up with you in a few months, see how it goes. But we try to be this repository of information to help people steer people in the right direction, because at the end of the day, it comes back to us when we do the right thing by people. And so if you have questions, it doesn't hurt at all to get some good information, to get a free consultation, and to make sure that you're not stepping into some landmines and hurting you and your family. So just want to wrap up on that note. Hope everybody has a great weekend. And again, that's a part of the public service we're doing with these shows, is teaching people how to deal with the IRS and make complicated situations easier.